Good evening. Let me begin with a very simple question. What is the most important activity in our national life? Answer, industry. Without it, we are nothing. Where else do you think the money comes from? And if the nation wants to get its hands on the wealth that industry alone can create, then it must learn to value industry, and even more important, to value those who work in it. I suspect everybody in the northwest of England knows that. After all, this is the birthplace of modern manufacturing industry, which makes it all the more alarming when world-famous companies here suddenly announce that they are having to shed skilled workers. Is it now, therefore, make or break? Well, now that's a question I want to discuss with four people who are very seriously concerned about the future of manufacturing industry. But before I do that, I want you to meet a couple who, in a very real sense, have a hands-on experience of what life in industry now is.
Each day, Andy and Kim Molnar travel to work at a small factory unit near Preston. Both motorcycle fanatics, they met when he asked her to be his sidecar passenger at races around the country. That partnership now extends to the business they run, making spares for classic British motorbikes. Still in their early 30s, their working lives chart the decline of British manufacturing. After university, Andy joined British Steel. He was made redundant, but got a job with British Aerospace in Lancashire. 4 months ago, with the defence industry facing an uncertain future, he took voluntary redundancy.
Hello, Stainless Engineering.
Kim's story is similar. She worked for 3 different textile companies. 3 times she lost her job.
I felt that we could do much better. I felt that we had enough experience between us to do a better job of running a company.
The product of that decision is the Stainless Engineering Company. During the 50s and 60s, British motorcycles were the best in the world. Today, classic names like Norton and BSA are back in demand. Stainless Engineering supply replica parts to classic bike owners around the world. Crucial to that success are the people on the shop floor, 2 skilled workers and 2 newly recruited apprentices.
The workforce is essential. At the end of the day, anyone can purchase the same machines as we have here, but it's how you use them and how the people use them. And the effort that you get out of the people within your workforce does, to a large extent, depend upon how much you put into them in terms of training, the emphasis on quality, etc.
I think they enjoy the work that they do here as well. They're quite proud of the end product, aren't they?
Yes, we are gaining a reputation for a quality product, both nationally and internationally.
And they're very proud of that. Very proud of that.
Money problems have been at the heart of manufacturing's difficulties in recent years. So Andy and Kim have worked hard to get their company on a firm financial footing. They bought their premises with an affordable bank loan and have set themselves realistic targets. Management is another area they're determined to get right. They suffered bad management in their previous jobs with dire consequences.
And I worked for some fairly large organisations during that time, Courtaulds, Crowthers and Carringtons, and the management that really counted was too remote to take any account of what people thought who were actually running the business from day to day. And I think that any business that gets itself into that situation is heading for problems.
As their company goes from strength to strength, the couple have a clear vision of what they're trying to achieve. Because they saw Britain's steel and textile industries left behind by foreign competition, Stainless Engineering has invested heavily in the latest computer-controlled machinery.
If you go into most machine shops within this area, they're predominantly using old-fashioned, antiquated equipment, with a lack of investment both in the equipment and in the people who are running it.
The recent debate about whether the government should have intervened to save jobs at Leyland Daff has also given smaller firms food for thought. While Andy and Kim accept that success or failure is largely in their hands, they do see a role for government.
I don't think either of us would say that you should prop up an ailing company or an ailing industry just for the sake of it. But manufacturing industry in this country has never, for a long time, been considered important, and things haven't been done to help that could have been done to help. The textile industry has been virtually destroyed by cheap imports. I think the same is true of the steel industry.
Yeah.
And that's a case where the government, I think, could and should have intervened.
Stainless Engineering now has its sights set on the future. It wants to expand its range of products, take on more staff, and establish itself as the market leader. But there are worries that the next generation of budding manufacturers isn't being prepared for the challenge ahead.
They're being encouraged to stay in education for longer periods of time to get better qualifications. And that's fine as far as it goes, but everybody can't be the shop foreman. At the end of the day, the country needs people who can make things. And the fact that you get dirty at work, I don't think is anything to be ashamed of. If you have a skill and you're a craftsman, which you are if you're an engineer, then don't be ashamed of it.
Despite all the firms that have closed and the jobs that have been lost, Andy and Kim remain convinced that manufacturing has a vital role to play in creating new prosperity for Britain.
Personally, I'm fervently of the opinion that any emergence from recession is dependent upon manufacturing industry. You can't just keep passing the same money around within the service industries. It just doesn't work at the end of the day. The government will be the company that goes broke as it fails to be able to finance public sector spending.
There you are, parable of our times. Well, now to discuss it, I have with me first the Member of Parliament for Macclesfield, where else, Nicholas Swinterson, who this very week has launched a national campaign to promote manufacturers. What did you think of that, those two?
Magnificent. I think the message was quite clear. Government and the institutions must realise that manufacturing industry is essential. It's the only source of non-inflationary economic growth.
Well, also with us, John Edmonds, the General Secretary of the GMB Union, whose union I think you're supporting Nick Winterton's initiative.
Yes, anything that supports manufacturing industry gets a vote from us.
And would you vote for them? Do you think they got their fingers on it?
I think they got something. I like the bit where they were saying about valuing the workforce. We've got something wrong here. The set is that if a company hits problems with profitability, the first thing they do is get rid of the valuable commodity, the asset they need to keep.
Well, also with us, Nick Riley, who's Managing Director of Vauxhall Motors at Ellesmere Port. And just reminded me, you've been there since '62, Vauxhall.
Yes, we celebrated our 30th year last year.
Did you think the two put their fingers on the crucial points?
I thought they got it absolutely right. And I thought one of the things they expressed very well was the need to develop a manufacturing culture in this country. The need to accept that manufacturing is not just a dirty word. It's actually essential to create our wealth.
And also with us, John Weston, the Managing Director of British Aerospace Defence, who, needless to say, arrived by plane. Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I did. It was very refreshing, I think, to see some of our young people really getting to grips with manufacturing as a means of earning their living. And I think a good few chords there they struck with me, particularly in the subject of the workforce as a whole, and getting them really involved in producing the performance that's necessary to be a world-class competitor.
Right, I have two Nicks and two Johns. That's got to be an excellent currency. Let me put the first question. There were those not so many years ago who were saying, oh, the days of manufacturing are over. We're going into a post-industrial society. That was nonsense. Yes?
Absolute rubbish. And it's cost this country dear. In the 1980s, we lost 2 million manufacturing jobs. And in recent times, manufacturing output has dropped by 6.5%. We can't compete. We can't achieve what John Weston and Nick Riley have said of being ahead of our competition if we allow our manufacturing base to be eroded. Government has neglected it, and it's got to be put back on course.
And is that why you've put this alliance together?
Absolutely, and I must emphasise this is an all-party initiative supported not only by industrialists but also by the trade unions. John Edmonds is a member of the panel, and also all party members, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democratic Party, as well as Conservative members of Parliament. We've got to have consensus. We've got to have, I'm sure John would agree on this, we've got to have cooperation rather than conflict.
But would you turn to the government for any kind of help?
I think it would be unrealistic in the current economic conditions to be looking to help from government that was actually going to cost billions of pounds. I think what we're looking to government to do is to create the right economic climate within which industry and manufacturing can perform. I think some of the things that are currently going on within the Department of Trade and Industry, looking for example at which British manufacturing industries either are world-class competitive or could become so, are very encouraging signs for the future. And I would like to see government actually have an industrial strategy which would help steer the way that scarce resources are allocated.
But then the managements of individual companies have got to start behaving properly. Kim said in that film, she said they were too remote, as if management almost exists separately from that which is managed. They've really got to get down there.
Well, I think that comes back to this whole issue of performance. And I think the better companies in Britain today have actually recognised that if you're going to be a world-class competitor, you've got to get 110% performance out of everybody that works in the business. And the best way of doing that is how you actually set a climate that tells them what needs to be done for their business to be successful, what their contribution is to it, and then asking them how their part of the job can be better performed.
Asking, not telling.
Absolutely. And in our business, and that has also consisted in actually stripping out a lot of the useless layers of management that are not contributing very much. We now have 4 layers of management where we used to have 12. We've reduced our indirect support staffs in most of our production areas by upwards of 50%. And we're giving a lot more responsibility and authority to the guys actually doing the job to decide how to do it better and do it better than the competition.
Now, at Vauxhall, do you do that? You don't tell them what to do, you tell them what is required and they have the training to do it?
Yes, we spend a tremendous amount of money and time on training, and we've actually taken it one step further symbolically. We've turned our traditional organisation chart, which is a triangle, upside down, to demonstrate that in fact management is only there to support the value-added part of the organisation, which are the people putting the cars together.
But John, is there not a danger that management adopt a new vocabulary and then disappear up it?
Yes, yeah, very much like. I mean, I've heard these arguments about participative management, and then I see how some of the companies behaved. I mean, present company accepted, of course, and it's quite different. I mean, I remember one manager giving a marvellous talk about democratic management. I talked to him afterwards, talking about one of his plants, and he said about his manager there, oh, he's an absolute brute. And I wondered, will the real manager please stand up? But just one thing about the culture of management. In Japan, graduate engineers go to work on the line when they go to work in a company. Even Japanese companies can't persuade graduate engineers from British institutions to go to work on the line first. We have this class thing, you see. They mustn't get their hands dirty. And unless people can demonstrate that they can do that skilled job, they don't carry a great deal of credibility with the people who do it every day of the week.
Because that was the point Kim made. There's no shame in getting your hands dirty.
And not just getting your hands dirty, but learning by doing, knowing that it's not just a matter of snapping your fingers and saying, let's do it this way, that you actually do have to grow little by little into the job and finding a lot of improvements on the job. So that's valuing the people, you see, valuing their experience and learning from them.
But you've got to equip them properly, Nick. I mean, the point was made, you know, that everybody can have the new technology. It's available all over the world. So those who make the best use of it are the ones who prosper.
Absolutely right. But I think John Edmonds is correct. The real problem about government is that too few people in government have had any experience of manufacturing industry, particularly, as John Edmonds has said, actually getting their hands dirty on the shop floor. You could probably count them on 2 or 3 pairs of hands, all those in the House of Commons that have had this experience. But of course, talking about the technology, as that wonderful young couple did, in order to invest in the new technology, you have to make the money and the profit to do it, or have an idea which the institutions and the banks are prepared to support. We've got to change, as John Edmonds and our 2 industrialists have said, we've got to change the culture in this country, and it's coming, but too slowly.
But is that it? There's been, it's a bit pompous to put it this way, but a kind of cultural disparagement of industry, and it's a snobby thing, and we've got to get rid of it.
Well, I think there has been. The DTI itself has not, in my view, been very proactive. in the last 10 or 12 years in creating the climate, never mind actually being proactive in bringing industry here. We have, in the Northwest, invested 400 million pounds over the last 3 years, and that's because there's a successful operation. We do get out on the shop floor, and it's been very successful. But I think that it's been almost against the trend. There's not been any discussion, not been any great encouragement to bring manufacturing industry to the fore in this country, neither by the government nor by other people who should be interested.
But John Edmonds, there are those who fear that new technology means fewer and fewer jobs because it takes fewer and fewer people to manufacture something because technology can do it.
Yes, but there's this mindset in management, you see. Restructuring, extra profitability always means shrinking. Restructuring equals shrinking. That's not the way to look at things. Do you know we've got no more people working in manufacturing now than are probably unemployed, if you take the real figure of 4 million plus. Yeah. That's a terrible situation for a country which is meant to be investing in the future.
Not only meant to be, but has to be. The whole point is that if we don't succeed in this, then we really do go downhill and we become an offshore island of industrial peasants.
But 4 million people in manufacturing out of a workforce of well over 20 million, I mean, this is nonsense. If you abandon manufacturing, very soon you abandon employment because you lose the wealth creation, you lose the skills, and then you're on that spiral downwards. There's no escape from it. Germany knows that. Japan knows that. We've got to relearn that.
Now, but John Weston, you see, it is nonetheless true that there are times in the running a business, a manufacturing business properly, where you have to restructure in a way which may shed jobs.
I mean, the issue at the end of the day is you've got to have your capacity tailored to your marketplace, and you've got to be competitive in your marketplace. And to be competitive, you will have to have fewer people to do the same sort of jobs as your competitors have got, unless they're working for a much lower wage rate. I think one of the things we've been catching up with in the UK in the last 10 years is actually moving from a situation where we were overmanned, we were overmanaged, overmanned, a lot of problems. We've been whittling through those and really getting down to, in our best industries, to a position where we really are world-class competitive, and not only the Japanese, but even people like the Germans and others are actually looking to establish manufacturing bases in the UK because we really are cost competitive.
But suppose you work, as Andy, the lad we saw did, you work for something like British Aerospace, you're a skilled man, suddenly for one reason or another you leave, either you're made redundant or you fear you're going to be. What do you do with your skill? Well, ideally, of course, you start a new business like here, and we'd like to see hundreds of Mathers and Platts and things starting up everywhere. But is that feasible now? Can we have the same kind of energetic development that we had in the 19th century?
If you have a training policy that is devoted to that, you see, you've got to bring forward people with a proper education in technology and a proper training policy. If you just train people to do a specific job without that broadening experience, that job goes, everything goes. Mind you, it would help if companies like British Aerospace invested in this country and didn't move production to Taiwan. I don't want to start too much of an argument, but that's a pretty demoralizing thing for a skilled workforce.
But if in fact, with this joint venture with Taiwan, British Aerospace can build up its regional jet production and can hold its place in the world and perhaps expand it, not only are they then going to be able to retain the number of people they've got currently, but hopefully they'll be able to build on it. Because the real problem in this country, because this country, as our manufacturing base has contracted, so our balance of trade deficit has increased. And this means that we're in grave difficulty when we begin to come out of recession, because all we will succeed in doing is sucking in imports, thus putting further pressure on our balance of trade. And you know when you do that, that the Chancellor is tempted in any situation to increase interest rates, and we're back into that vicious spiral again.
Right, so where do we begin? Do we begin right back in schools and the proper kind of education? How do we make things happen? Can the young people who are now about to leave school look forward to a prosperous future in manufacturing industry in Britain? And above all, in the Northwest?
I think that in this part of the world, the growth is going to come from the small and medium-sized companies. And one of the things we're doing here in the Northwest is we are creating a manufacturing excellence program whereby the larger companies who are still surviving, who have got some world-class manufacturing methods, are passing those on to the smaller and medium-sized companies. And that's going to help the Northwest in general. And I think we need much more cooperative ventures like that.
But you don't have to be big to do that. I mean, again, no. Andy and Kim that we saw, I mean, were determined that they would do the thing properly, even though they're a tiny little company.
That's quite right.
I mean, they may grow and grow and grow, one would hope, but I mean, making a better job of work by making a better use of people is clearly what it's all about, and that applies whatever the scale of the operation.
And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Because in the end, a company just has the talent of its people. That's all there is, really. A few machines which would eventually get out of date, a bit of goodwill, but really the talent of its people. So the heart of a modern industrial manufacturing economy is that particular aim. Develop the talent of your people. Value them, keep them, and train them so that any talent is fully developed.
Now, we would all
that's
agree
why,
with
Brian,
that.
can I just say
yes.
this? That's why we're, the second phase of the Manufacturing and Construction Industries Alliance is to carry the campaign for manufacturing industry into the schools, so that in fact we can excite and inspire young people about the attraction and the positive nature of manufacturing industry.
But will it have to go also into the banks, into the City of London, everywhere, to make sure it happens? You see, the danger is that we all know it, we could all even sing it set to music, but it won't happen. How do we get from the intention to the actuality?
I think that industry and the professional engineering institutions have got to take a lot of the burden on themselves. And we certainly, as an organisation, put an awful lot of work into our relationships with the universities and with the schools. I mean, we have hundreds of our engineers actually work with local school children. We have visits in from the local schools, trying to really give them a feel for what a career in manufacturing today is all about and what an exciting and challenging career that can be. But we've got to work at it. We're starting from a very low base in comparison with a lot of our major industrial competitors.
But could actually Mr. Weston indicate what the city, what the bankers of this country, what the institutions could do to help to bring this about? Here we have two very large companies, Vauxhall and British Aerospace. How would they like to see the institutions and the city react and behave to help to bring about this regeneration?
Well, I think there's a lot the institutions and the city can do in terms of the economic climate that we were talking about earlier, but I think the particular point about how do we really get our best young people into manufacturing industry instead of joining the civil service or the foreign office or the banks or the city is maybe something which is rather more fundamental, and it comes really back to what do we value in our society? Do we actually value the financier in the City of London, and do we value our diplomat in Paris higher than one of our major manufacturing companies' engineers?
Well, that was the snobby thing. I mean, we reached the point where, a gentleman didn't go into industry. It was better to be in the learned profession or even an officer of the Crown or something. And one wants to see, but we want it at every level. I mean, what I want to see is when young people leave school or college, they can walk into proper jobs.
Proper jobs with training too. Yeah. You see, no one should be allowed to employ anybody between the ages of 16 and 20 without providing training. And there's a leadership role for government here, because if government pays for that training and says to an employer, you will pay the wages, but we'll pay for the training. If government will give messages out through the budget, through the autumn statement, through the way it treats people, through the speeches, through the House of Commons, to say manufacturing industry is important, it's not gone, we need to get it back, it's the heart of our economy, then things begin to change. Throw a few honours about. That wouldn't be a bad idea either. That seems to be the way government acts in this strange country of ours.
To the right people, though, John.
To the people who actually do something to earn it. And I don't mean that. I don't mean managing directors. No. I mean one or two people at key positions, lower down, if I can use that terrible phrase, in British industry, who actually turned things round. A few technician engineers getting a few OBEs wouldn't be bad for the status of manufacturing industry.
Well, let me ask you all a divided final question. One, if you were the Prime Minister, what would you do to make sure that manufacturing industry flourishes? And two, if you were just starting at school and you were very young, how would you want to prepare yourself to enjoy that when it happens?
Well, I think in the economic sector, it's the obvious things. It's low inflation, it's low interest rates, and it's a strategy within government that says manufacturing industry is important. And I think we have seen some positive moves in that direction in the last year or two, which I find very encouraging. I think in terms of the youngster coming in from school, I mean, it is up to all of us to actually get the message across that Britain is good at manufacturing industry. It has a bright future as a world-class competitor. And some of the industries which we are good at, and aerospace happens to be one of them, and I would take issue with the fact we're exporting jobs. I mean, we've actually increased our exports as a proportion of our total sales in aerospace up to something like 65% last year, which is the highest of any manufacturing sector in the UK. Yes, to do that, we've had to put certain work overseas with our customers, but nevertheless, we've kept an awful lot in the UK, and we still are a world-class industry. We are still recruiting the youngsters, and we're still working with them to train them for a worthwhile career. And we've got to get the message across that that career is there, it's going to be rewarding, and it's going to be worthwhile for them.
John Weston, thank you. Now, Nick Riley.
Well, I think we all need to sell this country, and the Northwest in particular, collectively as a manufacturing base. Other countries do it very well. They get together, the central government, the local government, the institutions, the trade unions, the employers, and they all collectively sell an area. We don't do a very good job at that, and I think government could certainly help. For example, we're in an area which is supposed to be where regional grants are supposed to be available. It's damn difficult for a company to find out actually what is specifically available for a particular investment. You never get that in Germany or in France. And certainly never get that in Japan. It's clear. It needs to be more transparent.
Right now, John, we're getting a little short of time.
Yes, not just a worthwhile job, but you've got to convince youngsters that they're going to have a secure job, a satisfying job, but a secure job in manufacturing industry. We've got to break this redundancy culture that exists at the moment. And that means that someone's got to start spending some money. If you're changing a culture, the government might lead it. How about giving some money to companies, instead of making people redundant, giving them money to train to a quality standard?
And the last word to the member for
Well,
Macclesfield.
the Northwest really is the area of highest potential in the United Kingdom, and I think the government can set an example by providing infrastructure expenditure to help the competitive position of British industry, but also to introduce capital allowances to help selected and targeted areas of the British manufacturing economy, and in addition to that, and I think this is important, to target areas where we can in fact set up import substitution to ensure that we can regenerate our manufacturing base. The young inspire and excite, and they will come in.
Well, now, can I thank you all four and just add 2 points. First of all, you may wonder why we hadn't a member of Her Majesty's government here. Well, we did invite them, but none would come. What a pity, they might have learned something. And the other point is that we're not just talking about economic matters and material things. In the end, it is a moral question. It is about happiness. When you saw the men coming out of Leyland weeping, skilled men who'd lost their jobs, you suddenly realized, yes, it is moral. It does matter. It is about having a proper, fulfilled life. People want to be happy at work, and they want to be at work. Thank you very much. Good night. Thank you, Dan.